I want to jump right into this. And before we do, I want to say a quick word of prayer, especially given the recent law that was passed in New York, what's going on over there, and just overall in general. You know, Old Testament, you see people killing babies, God sends a judge. New Testament, you see people killing babies, God sends a judge, God sends Christ. This day and age, we're killing babies, He's coming back again. Simply put. So it's definitely something that is a very, very heated topic. It's an emotional topic, but it's something that needs to be discussed. The very fact that we have to discuss it, in my opinion, is absurd, but nonetheless, it's where we're at in our society. Thank you, Lord, for this day you've given us. I just pray, Holy Spirit, you would come into this place. We welcome you. We invite you. Take liberty as you wish. I pray you would speak through me, Lord. Let it be all of you, none of me, and that you would just saturate this place with your presence, Father. And let there be understanding, let there be clear communication, and let you be glorified. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Topic of abortion. I want to talk about whether or not, first of all, it's even moral in the first place, and should it be legal. Way of a thought experiment. Suppose you're washing dishes one day and your son or daughter comes up to you and says, "Mom or Dad, can I kill it?" Now, your response is not going to be an immediate yes or no, but instead would be, "Can I kill what?" The roach in the kitchen, please do. The neighbor's cat, I'm not a cat person myself, but probably not. Your annoying brother who likes to copy everything you do, yeah, no, we need to talk, because that's not acceptable. Now, what this shows us is that the question of whether or not we can kill something cannot be answered until we know what that something is, which is exactly the question that has to be answered before you can even consider whether or not abortion is immoral, moral, or should be legal or illegal. So what is it? What is the unborn? And quite frankly, it's really a simple problem to solve. It's a simple issue to get an answer to, because it really comes down to, what is the unborn? Undeniably, abortion takes the life of something. So we can say abortion takes the life of what? And whatever that answer is going to determine the rest of the questions you have about abortion. It really is that simple. It really is, I would even dare say, black and white. And there's going to be some controversy to that I'd be happy to address later. So, if the unborn are not living, growing individual human beings, then quite frankly, then nothing else matters. Have as many as you like, because it would be no different than clipping your toenails or cutting your hair. Just a group of cells. However, if the unborn are living, growing individual human beings, then how could we give any kind of a justification for killing innocent, defenseless, voiceless human beings? The way Greg Koppel put it was, if the unborn are not human, then no justification for abortion is necessary. However, if the unborn are human, then no justification for abortion is adequate. So really the only thing we need to decide is, what are the unborn? Now, the argument, I'm really just going to use one argument, and everything else is going to be a defense of the argument, and it's simply this. It is wrong, i.e. immoral, to intentionally kill an innocent human being as an end in and of itself. Premise 2. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being as an end in and of itself. Therefore, abortion is morally wrong, and I'd argue should be illegal. Especially given that our Constitution gives us the right to life. It gives us the right to, if you're a human being, you have the right of liberty, pursuing life, pursuing happiness. And the only requirement to meet that right is to be part of the human race. But of course, this hinges on whether or not that part of premise 2 is true, and I would say that science indisputably backs this up. This is a quote taken from an embryology textbook, which is Basic Embryology 101, which says, "The development of a human being begins with fertilization, a process by which two highly specialized cells, the spermatozoon from the male and the oocyte from the female, unite to give rise to a new organism, the zygote." This is not a Christian book. This is not a pro-life, pro-choice book. This is a book that teaches embryology. Next quote, a zygote is the beginning of a new human being. Human development begins at fertilization. This highly specialized, totipotent cell marks the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. Now, again, these are not biased books that are trying to back up any specific agenda. It's just a scientific fact that this is when human life begins. I'm not going to go too in depth because I want to open that up for questions later. That please, by all means, grill me, throw them at me. Now, it would be something to just say, okay, so maybe those people though were kind of on my side or believed as I did. Here you have Dr. Warren Hearn, author of a book called Abortion Practice, who wrote a textbook on how to perform abortions. Obviously is for it. Has a website, you can look at a lot of his stuff. In that he says this, we have reached a point in this particular technology where there is no possibility of denying an act of destruction. It is before one's eyes. These sensations of dismemberment flow through the forces like an electrical current. His words, not mine. Ronald Dworkin, author of book Life's Dominion, says this. First, I believe it's in the first chapter, first sentence of this book says, abortion, which means deliberately killing a developing human embryo, and then goes on to say, is a choice for death. Camelia Paglia, a big pro-choice advocate, says, I have always frankly admitted that abortion is murder, the extermination of the powerless by the powerful, which results in the annihilation of concrete individuals and not just clumps of insensate tissue. I want to pause for a second. There's a lot more I can quote, but I really kind of just want to get through a lot because I want to open it up for questions. First and foremost, I'm not here to appeal to any emotions necessarily. It may be emotional at times, but I just want to present the facts. What is the truth of the matter? Regardless of how I feel about something, truth and reality does not care about my feelings. However, when something as heavy as this kind of a topic brings relevant truth that would imply that there are thousands, millions, countless number of individual human lives being killed every single day, then something has to be done at some point. At the same time, my job here is not to come and try to convict you. If you had an abortion, I'm not here to convict or condemn you. But I do want to let you know that if you have, there is a God who still loves you, who gave His Son even if you gave yours. And the only way you can find peace and forgiveness is through Him. That is something I certainly want to make clear. Nevertheless, this is the truth of the matter. So if even the other side would agree that the unborn are humans, they're persons, they're individuals, life begins at conception, whatever the case is, then why is it still legal? I'd like to know that myself. Do you know in America, if you destroy a bald eagle egg, that is an unborn, developing bald eagle embryo, if you will get fined up to $10,000. But if a woman wants to destroy her unborn, developing human child, the government will pay for it. How is that the rationale of our country? You would think that the safest place that an unborn child could be is in the warmth and comfort of his or her mother's womb, but the fact and the sad reality is that the safest place a human developing child can be is inside a bald eagle's egg. Let that sink in. Now you might be thinking, okay, but clearly there's a difference between a developing human being, there's lots, and that's true, lots of stages, and between a fully developed human being, and you would be right. In fact, there are a lot of, especially in the stages of development, there are a lot of differences between you, the embryo, and you, now the adult or the teenager or whatever age you're at now. In fact, there is something famously known as the SLED test, and I can give you the name of the guy who came up with that, which slips my mind right now.
Scott Klusendorf.
He uses that argument, but it came from a book, and I'm pretty sure I have it somewhere in my notes that I have to look through, but it's called the SLED test, which is an acronym that stands for size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. In other words, there are 4 differences between you, the adult or the maturing human being and you inside of a womb, but none of these four differences are in any way justifications for killing you in the womb as opposed to killing you now. Size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Virtually any argument that you can give in favor of abortion will fall under one of these four categories, but I want to show that none of these will justify killing, and if you are going to use that argument for abortion, then you must use it similarly for a person outside of the womb, and if it doesn't apply there, then you shouldn't use it for the other one. First one, size. Now, you might think, okay, but the unborn are clearly smaller than us. Well, yeah, obviously. But does that justify that the bigger human being can kill the little one? Well, I hope not, because men are also typically larger than women. But clearly, I don't think anybody would advocate that men can do what they want with women because they're smaller. But if we can't do it here, then why can we do it here? So that shouldn't be a factor for justifying abortion. Level of development, okay. Well, a toddler is obviously more developed than a fetus, but at the same time, a toddler is not as developed as a 9-year-old. But equally, a 9-year-old is not as developed as, say, a teenager. But none of these here could legally kill the other one unless you reach that one, then you can kill this one. Hopefully, though, that you see the absurdity in the argument there. Now, you might be thinking, okay, right, but there are significant differences within the level of development. Okay, like what? Well, some people might say, well, the unborn can't feel pain. At least to a certain stage. They can't feel pain. Even at a certain stage, the unborn are not even conscious, or maybe they're not self-aware. And I would agree with it. That's true. We can see that at certain levels of development, unborn are not conscious, maybe even not self-aware. However, neither is someone in a coma, but I can't kill them. And if being conscious or self-aware is a criteria, then we should be able to kill someone in a coma. On top of that, this right here is Gabby Gringus, who has a condition where she cannot feel pain. I wrote it down somewhere. The congenital insensitivity to pain, where the reason she's wearing glasses, and she actually has fake teeth, because when she was born and teething, she began to tease on anything she could find, whether it was a piece of wood, metal, or her own fingers. And because she could not feel pain, began to basically eat her fingers raw until they would bleed. Her teeth would fall out, she wouldn't notice. She wears glasses because as one time something got in her eye, she tried to scratch it out, just kept scratching at it, and when her mother came to her, saw that she had taken out almost half her eye, they had to remove the girl's eye. She can't feel pain. So, based on the argument that we should be able to perform and kill unborn human children because they can't feel pain or are not self-aware, then the moment someone like this goes into a coma, it's better all off. Go for it. I did a debate with a feminist lawyer who was formerly the executive director of Narrow Pro-Choice in Texas. And in our debate at Lone Star College, she said, well, the unborn are not living, breathing, walking human beings. I said, well, they are living, they are breathing, but I guess they're not walking, so I guess we could kill people in a wheelchair as long as we hold their breath and make sure they're not walking, right? No, of course not. What's the difference, though? What would be the difference between these two? Let's move on. Not level of development, environment. Now this is where it kind of gets a little bit, I don't want to say more serious because it's really not that much more serious, but it's at least more perhaps sincere or more popular. Where people will argue the environment, which is basically location. Still not as good, but it at least sometimes carries a little more traction for some people. Suppose it took you 70 miles to get here today. In the time that you got into your car and drove 70 miles to get here, did you change the nature of what you were? No, you're still a human being. You still have a human nature. Did your value change? No, of course not. If you were to find $100 in a dumpster, would the value of that $100 change? No, of course not, because location does not determine value, neither does location determine what you are. Your essence, your nature is something that is grounded in you, that is not based on external factors. So here's the issue I have with arguments revolving around environment being a justification for abortion. If traveling 70 miles down the road did not change what you were or change your value, then please explain to me how traveling 7 inches down a birth canal changes your value and what you are. Because if I can't kill you driving 70 miles, then why can I kill this unborn child traveling 7 inches? Still a baby, still a human being, still has value. But you push 7 inches backwards, do what you want, 7 inches out, too late. In Texas, and as one of many other places, you can have abortions up to 22 weeks. The argument really goes around, well, it's because, there's a level of viability that we can get into later that people would argue for, but there's also been in Texas women who have given birth to children 22 weeks and younger. I think the earliest so far was in 2017. 21 weeks and 5 days old, woman gave birth, baby survived. Here's the issue I have. On the right side here, you have a 22-week pregnant woman. On the left side, you have a woman who was 22 weeks that just gave birth. Doctor walks in, same room. Same age, the children are at the same level of development. If he goes to the left side and kills this baby, he goes to jail. If he goes to the right side and kills that one, he gets paid for doing his job. What's the difference? Environment. That's it, 7 inches difference. One's in the womb, one's outside of the womb. I'd say environment's not a good justification. Degree of dependency. Here's also, again, where it becomes very popular, where people would say, okay, but no, this is, it's in my body, my choice. The baby depends on my body. And that degree of dependency allows me to make a decision because since the baby's depending on me this much, I have a right to do what I wish. Okay? But if degree of dependency is a justification for abortion, then let me ask you this question. Here are 3 human beings that are equally, that all in some way have a degree of dependency on something or someone external to themselves for their survival. Which one should we kill first? Now granted, Hawkins passed away not too long ago, but people in his condition, which one of these should we kill first? Which one can we kill? Or how about this question? Which one of these can we kill legally? Oh, just one. Degree of dependency is kind of something all the arguments for abortion are bizarre to me, especially this one, because basically the age or level of viability is considered at what point can a baby be born and still survive. But then that's kind of vague to me. Still survive what? Still survive on its own? I know of no baby that is born and can survive on its own, unless of course you're this baby, but I know of no child that can do that. A lot of you are still developing. Can't kill you. I'm more developed than some of you. I may be more independent than some of you, and vice versa. But viability, and mind you, viability does not determine what you are, doesn't determine your nature, neither does it determine your value. Because what it really determines is the level of our technology. Because in the US, level of viability is about 21, 22 weeks. But if you go to somewhere like in the East, level of viability about 28 weeks. Why? Well, we have better technology. So you're telling me that if a woman here at 21, 22 weeks pregnant wanted to have an abortion, all she had to do was fly over there where the level of viability is a little bit higher, and all of a sudden, what, does that somehow magically change the nature or value of the unborn child inside her womb? Of course not. Because age of viability does not determine what you are, neither does it determine your value. I know of no baby that comes outside the womb and is completely independent. My body, my choice. Well, no, it's not your body, especially given that half of these pregnancies are males. Because, and by the way, killing your body is suicide, so it's not your body that you're killing. And, okay, it depends on your body for survival, absolutely. But when it's born, it also depends on your body. Whether you're breastfeeding or giving the baby a bottle, you are still using your body. So if a woman wanted to kill a baby outside the womb because, well, hey, it still depends on my body, she cannot do that. Why? Environment. It's not 7 inches behind her, where it once was. A lot more I can say, but just a quick, obviously, so degree dependency, not a good justification. A quick recap: SLED test, size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. In any conversation you have on abortion, this is a great strategy to use, or even to consider if you're considering arguments for or against abortion. Let it fall into these. The second favorite I have that I apply to just about everyone is called trotting out the toddler. And what that basically means is, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to tell you right now my game plan. Any questions or objections or arguments in favor of abortion will be filtered through this, and filtered specifically, for the most part, through the trotting out the toddler. What does that mean? You give me an argument for an abortion, or a justification for abortion. I say, okay, time out. Let's bring out the toddler. Can I kill this baby under those same conditions? No. Then why is it allowed for your condition? Because the only difference is environment, or level of degree of dependency, or level of development, or size. For example, I'm going to give a few quick answer a few quick arguments, some common arguments against abortion, and then I want some questions. Some of the most popular are things like, what about rape? Rape and incest. Are you in favor of abortion for rape and incest? No. I'm going to go this far and say I am not in favor of abortion for any circumstance. You might think of a qualification, and we'll get there if someone wants to bring that up. But here's why about the rape issue. Try not the toddler. I know of a young lady, and I'm sure unfortunately it's happened before, but rather than use a specific person, suppose there is a lady, she's married, her and her husband get in a fight. She leaves the house that night, goes and has a bit of a good time, maybe drinks too much, wakes up the next day, does not remember what happened the night before. Thinks to herself, I really messed up, I should really reconcile things with my husband. Goes back to her husband, they make up, there is intercourse, trying to go over the young heads there, and lo and behold, she gets pregnant. But it's not till 9 months later she finds something peculiar when the baby's born. That baby doesn't look like my husband. Goes to the doctor, turns out, was there something that happened 9 months ago? No, not that I can remember. Actually, there was one night, I don't remember the whole night. Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, you got raped. It is possible for a woman to be raped without even knowing it, especially if she gets drugged or passes out, what have you. But the problem is the baby's already born. If the argument is, if a woman's raped, she should be allowed. Why? Because of the emotional pain, the stress, the trauma. Say what you will. But if that is the argument for killing an unborn child because of these conditions, can this lady kill her child now that it's born because she still has the same conditions? Well, no, not legally. Well, why should legality matter if the argument is emotional trauma, stress, etc., etc.? Here's another thing about that. Killing the baby doesn't fix the issue. Yes, but the woman's going to remember her rapist every time she sees a child. Right, and killing, perhaps. But killing the baby is not going to erase her memory either, will it? Why should a child die for the sins of his or her father? Incest, same argument. Okay, what about someone who cannot afford a child? What if they cannot afford to bring a child into this world? Okay. Suppose I have 2 kids, 9-year-old daughter who's here today, 1-year-old son at home with my wife. Suppose I lost my job today. Suppose I just found out I owe a lot of money to something. And suppose I look at the numbers and think, my gosh, we're going bankrupt, we have no money, we are broke. Can I kill my 2 kids? No. Not legally. Yeah, but I can't afford it anymore. Too bad. So do I just stuff them back in and then we're cool, or how does that work? If it is not a justification for killing outside the womb, then it cannot apply to the inside the womb. A lot more areas I can go, but those are the two main objections I hear about. I want to hear what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you not like me anymore? Did you not like me in the first place? Talk to me. Yes.
There is one argument that I, despite thinking about it a decent amount, have not been able to answer in terms of this. So it is definitely easier to talk to defend or not to go against abortion when it is months in. But I've heard the argument, well, okay, that's fine. Then it should be wrong after the neurological development of the child. But beforehand, it's fair game.
Beforehand, what? I'm sorry.
Before
fair game.
The brain, like the brain is developed, which is a much smaller window, but still, if the brain hasn't developed, then it's fair game. That's why.
Right. Yeah, and I would say so. I mean, so counter arguments. Try not to tolerate a lot of these things. Easy to do in counter abortions. Really, any kind of debate. That would fall under, I'd say, level of development.
Yes.
There are children born, I think it's anencephalic, who are born with only 10% of a brain. The brain literally looks like a cavity. It's only 10% of a brain, and the rest is just fluid. They're still human. They still have value. They just don't function as well as the average human being would. However, your level of functionability does not determine, again, your value or what you are. So I would say, why is that fair game when I can point to a child who is born who maybe doesn't have a level of development or neurological activity as I or the average person would? On top of that, we already talked about someone in a coma has no brain activity perhaps. And maybe we might even know that it's a reversible coma. Can we kill them? No. Which goes to show then, therefore, level of neurological activity is not a sufficient justification to kill an innocent human being. Yes?
I guess, so I wasn't neurological activity, it was neurological development. So like anything that resembles a brain at all.
So wouldn't that be dead already? Wouldn't they be dead already?
Huh?
Wouldn't they be dead already?
If they have any sort of brain at all, anything that resembles a brain,
gotcha.
It's off.
Gotcha. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, like when it's just starting out. Right?
Absolutely. Right. So again.
Cells, yeah.
Right.
Can you repeat the question?
So basically, from what I understand, tell me if I understand this correctly. In the stages of development when perhaps a brain is not even recognizable, has begun to develop. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say it still would fall under level of development. Do we need brains to be human, and do we need brains to have value? So at this point in time, I don't know of technology that exists that you could replace your brain, but I know you could replace your heart with something else. It's not biological tissue. Pacemaker. If we got to the point to where technology was so developed, you could replace your brain with something else, could I kill that person? I'd say no. Going back specifically to what you're asking, I would again ask, why would that be a justification for killing the unborn child? Is it a human being? And if the answer is yes, I would say then I go back to the argument. Yes?
If I'm Peter Singer or Michael Tooley, I'm going to be in an argument these days not about all that, but
right.
Personhood.
Yes.
And if you could address that, that's a pretty general question. But also, number two, if you want to get to that later, if I'm a utilitarian, I'm saying no. If someone doesn't have a developed brain or is not conscious or able to interact with the world, no, they're not useful. So those are some pretty grim sounding things to us.
No, it's good, yeah.
But those two things.
So
before
yes.
respond to that, can I just chip
Sure, absolutely.
on
Yeah.
the other, which is an interesting thing to consider there, Eric. But one thing to think about too, though, is that almost virtually no abortion is ever done when there isn't at least some minimalistic brain or neurology at that point. So
absolutely.
not really necessarily Most people wouldn't even know they're pregnant at that point.
Yeah, actually.
It would be very difficult to know that your woman's pregnant.
Yeah,
early on.
in fact, and I just heard that not too long ago, that if there, I think it's, most of them happen after, I want to say 6 weeks, don't quote me on that, specifically also, and because having an abortion too early has a lot of risky complications, and you might not even know you're pregnant in the first place. Some women don't even know till like a month or two after they're pregnant. So yeah, I don't even know of any that would have an abortion there. Well, we have his question still, and then
I want to take one from online. People are curious.
okay, awesome. Yes. Okay, so let me touch on that real quick, and then maybe you can help me keep in mind. He raised a hand. He wanted to make a comment. Okay, so the personhood thing. Lots to say, lots of ways to hit that, especially being someone who studies a lot of philosophy of mind and what personhood is. So the easiest way I would say is, if for pragmatic reasons, if I were in a taxi cab, I would say, first of all, personhood is not necessarily relevant to the legality of killing a human being. If I were to kill someone on the street, the law is not going to say, wait, time out. I know Eric killed somebody. I know they were human beings, but did that person have a soul? Were they a person? Is that? No, the question doesn't even come up, obviously, right? Metaphysically speaking, I would say if you're a human being, then by default you would be a person, because personhood is more of the broad category to what we are as our nature. Bear with me for a second. Especially as a Christian, I believe God is a person. He is three persons. One God, He's tripersonal. He is person divine. You have person angelic. You have person humans. I am a person human. So by default, if I am a human, I am necessarily a person. Just like any dog is necessarily a type of canine. You can't be a canine and not be a dog. No. You can't be a dog, without being a canine. Because one comes logically prior, or even ontologically prior than the other. One is what grounds the very essence of what you are. And Peter Singer's a philosopher, so I mean that's why I kind of went there. Also, regarding personhood in general, boy, that could we could spend hours on that. I would also further argue that we all have an identity that remains the same throughout change, because it is grounded in our soul. Give me like 38 seconds, time me to explain that really quick. If you were to chop me in half, you would have 50% of a body, but you would not have 50% of a person, because I am not identical to, nor is my identity grounded in my physical existence or my physical parts. If I cut a table in half, I will have 50% of a table, because living things are not the kind of things that have their natures or identities dependent on their physical parts. If I rearrange a pile of wood, I can create a raft, because it is a physical object whose nature and identity is dependent on the structure of its parts. Living organisms do not operate that way. They are what they are, independent of the parts they lose or gain. You with me? Is that okay? That being said,
An amputee is not a person.
there you go. That being said, I am constantly changing parts. It is said allegedly every 7 to 10 years I get almost an entire new body. But if I am still the same person, then it follows that my identity must be grounded in something beyond the physical, namely the soul. That's one out of about 12 arguments I can give you for the soul. But I would argue, because you exist and you're conscious, you have a soul which grounds your personhood, and it is the very reason you can even be a human in the first place. That's a very on the thing. Second one was what?
The pragmatic
Utilitarianism.
Right, yeah, and that would, and I would ask the person, I would just basically ask them, why would that be a criteria for whether or not we can kill something, the pragmatic use of it. And even the whole concept of utilitarianism itself, I would say, is not even, what's the word, I want to say livable, because you don't know the further reaching consequences of your actions now. You only know you're limited. You only have so much knowledge or hypothetical knowledge of what could happen out of a given situation. But to truly be a utilitarian, you'd have to know every single outcome of your decision, which only God could and would know, which means if we're to be utilitarians, we should follow what God says in the first place. Okay, and yes.
I just wanted to tag on the brainstem,
Yes.
brain activity. Using the eagle egg example, I'm guessing the fun would be the same if it was the day after the egg was laid versus the day before
It's
it
good.
was hatched.
Absolutely.
And in both cases, there's a huge difference in the brainstem activity of the eagle.
Absolutely.
Good
Right,
point.
good, very good point. Yes, online question.
Online. So Mikey Hernandez and Kevin.
We don't want to take anything from him.
Said, ask that fool choice in the scenario that involved the health of the woman and the health of the baby.
Say that again louder, please.
So when it involves the health of a woman and the health of a baby, I'm assuming he's maybe an either or situation.
Mm-hmm.
What's your choice? Or yeah, where it's life and death for the woman
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah, a few things I want to say about that. First of all, there's a big misconception that we need abortions, otherwise all these women are going to die because their life's at stake. There's a gentleman out, I think it's in California, who every year he sees 15,000 women who come to him because their doctor has said you need to get an abortion or you will die or you're going to have a lot of complications, etc., etc. This person who sees 15,000 women a year says, I think out of those 15,000, maybe like 2 or 3 tops that year actually needed that kind of a procedure. The rest were their doctors telling them that because they could get sued if they do something wrong and it's just easier to perform an abortion. In fact, he has women who need cancer radiation treatment who are pregnant and they survive and it's successful because he knows what he's doing. So there are a lot of women, unfortunately, who are misled and says you need to have an abortion because your life's at stake when that's actually not the case. Out of 15,000 he sees, 2 or 3, maybe tops, actually require that kind of a procedure. Less than 1%. And by the way, the majority of abortions that are happening have nothing to do with the woman's life at stake. Now, let's assume that was the case. It would depend on what you're talking about. Generally, people point to what's called ectopic pregnancies, where the baby does not, the unborn, the fertilized egg does not place where it should place, and it places in the fallopian tubes. Most of the time, by the time that is detected, the baby's already dead. So it's just a matter of removing the dead baby. Second, here's where I would say, remember earlier I said I would not say there's any justification for an abortion. When something like this is at play, if the unborn needs to be removed, I would not call it an abortion. Here's why. If someone straps a bomb to their chest and blows himself up, we call it suicide. But if a brave soldier jumps on a grenade to save his comrades, we call that a sacrifice. Similar action, same outcome, different intent. Because philosophically speaking, the definition, how we label and define an action, is not necessarily by the physical acts that take place or the outcome, but by the intent behind it. So, when abortions are happening, the intent, as I said in my argument, is to intentionally kill an innocent human being as an end in and of itself. That's your goal. When there's this kind of pregnancy happening, the intent is to save as many lives as possible, and sometimes you can only save one. And the indirect outcome or consequence is one of these persons are dying, but our intent is to save as many as possible. Sometimes we can only save one. The intent is not to kill, but to save, and unfortunately sometimes there is a killing that happens. But again, I would not label that an abortion because first, you have people trying to label any and everything abortions these days. If a woman has a miscarriage, they call it an accidental abortion or a natural abortion. No, nature didn't abort my child. Something happened. Here's another thing. When miscarriages happen, it is something wrong happens, and the outcome is unfortunately a dead child. When an abortion happens, the successful outcome is a dead child. Clearly there's something different there.
Just to articulate that.
Yes.
Nature can't have an intent.
Right, absolutely, good. Yes.
How do you respond to someone who says, well, in the case of abortion because, well, maybe she cannot afford her child. Killing the child is not an end in and of itself. The end that you're seeking is financial relief.
Right.
Or emotional relief or something like that.
Right. So and that's, I would stand by what I said earlier, but to elaborate on this. So I think a big problem the way these kind of conversations are labeled or the way they're driven is we tend to, or some group of people tend to make it out to be that the issue is that the woman is pregnant. When a woman gets raped and gets pregnant, what's the issue? She got raped. If a woman is poor and gets pregnant, what's the issue? She's poor. So then why do we label the issue as her being pregnant? As if killing the baby all of a sudden makes her rich. Or as if killing the baby all of a sudden makes men cease to rape. Which means we're not even attacking the issue, we're attacking the innocent bystander of the issue. Let's say, and here's a hypothetical. Let's say a woman has 5 kids. She gets pregnant. She cannot afford the baby. On her way to the abortion clinic, she stops at the gas station and buys a lottery ticket and becomes a millionaire. Can she still perform an abortion? I mean, can she still have her abortion? Legally, yeah. Oh, well, then I guess that wasn't necessarily a factor that we need to even consider, because the truth is, whether it's rape, money, financial issues, the real question is it a human being? Does the unborn have value? If the answer is yes, then I stand by the argument I gave. If the answer is no, then the woman with 5 kids who gets pregnant, why does she have to kill the unborn? Why can't she pick one of the 5? I mean, that's the argument, right? She can't afford it. I mean, here's her chance to kind of get rid of the annoying one that keeps, bugging her all the time. Hey, I'm here at the abortion clinic. Okay, well, let's take a look. No, pick that one. Yeah, the one that, I can't afford it. This one needs the most, clearly. I mean, if the argument is I cannot afford it, then why do we limit it to the environment of being in the womb? And that's where I would say it's arbitrary. Yes?
So just to back up a little bit and focus a little bit more on this issue, your original syllogism was that abortion is killing an unborn child as an end in and of itself.
Yes.
But it seems, based on just stuff we've discussed here tonight, that is rarely, if ever, the reason. The reason is always for preference or health or psychological value or for whatever reason. It's for the sake of the mother. Not as an end of itself, but for the sake of another person. So now,
right, at the cost of killing the unborn child, which is the end itself.
So now your line in the syllogism has to read, it is immoral to kill one person for the sake of another person.
I guess that would be implied in there because...
so would you still agree with that?
With what?
It is immoral to kill one person for the sake of another person. Because that's kind of what we're...
Well, it would depend. So now we're getting a little bit more technical, which I appreciate. And one side, do you want to say something now?
I wanted to make a comment to that.
Sure.
There's a distinction made in the Ten Commandments, discussed like in the Hebrew language. I watched a video on this, I'm not an expert. But that defines do not murder, and use the word for murder instead of kill.
Sure.
And so there's a difference between killing, such as like in war, or murder, which is out of cold water. There's no justification. And so I don't know if we're just going to start bending words here.
Yeah.
But just...
Yeah, so and it's good to get technical. So here's the reason I say, okay, if you were to say you cannot kill an innocent human being as, what was the way you put it?
For the sake of.
For the sake of someone else, or of another person.
For whatever reason, legitimate or not. For the
Right.
sake of someone else.
For the sake of someone else. Well, here's a problem I have with that, is that if someone's poor or someone got raped, when they kill the unborn, it's not for the sake of the other person, because they're going to exist whether or not this unborn child is born or not. So that's where it would fall apart. Here's the reason I word it this way. Note, I didn't say it's just simply wrong or immoral necessarily to kill an innocent human being, period. And here's why I say that. Bear with me here, because obviously this is a very deep philosophical question that deals with a lot of metaphysics, has some science in it, and as a mature, controversial topic, we need to get into the controversial, mature kind of things. During 9/11, the government gave the okay to shoot down one of the planes that was heading towards a building. Which means the government said gave the okay, the permission to kill a plane full of innocent human beings. Now, why? Is that okay to do? A few things to be said here. When it comes to moral issues, and this is even biblical, Not every moral issue is the same, neither is every moral issue equal. There are some issues that carry a greater moral value or weight. Here's a hypothetical I like to do whenever I teach classes on morality or when I go into the moral argument. As a quick hypothetical, I like to watch and play zombie games and watch zombie stuff, so pray for me. Let's imagine, if you will, we lived in a post-apocalyptic zombie kind of environment world. Say you had a son or daughter. And I usually ask these at churches, and the answer is always no. I don't know about asking it here because I don't know what the answer is going to be, so just don't raise your hand. But I would ask, who here thinks it's wrong to do a line of cocaine just for the fun of it? You know, who thinks it's wrong to, to just grab a bag of cocaine, just have a party, to do it for the sake, whatever. In churches, people say no. Okay, I'll just put it that way. Okay. Now here's a hypothetical. Let's say it was a zombie apocalypse. You had a son or daughter, right? And they needed a specific medication for their survival. They just ran out, and if they don't get this medication in the next 4 or 5 hours, they're going to have a heart attack or a seizure, they're going to die. So you as the father say, I need to get the medication my son or daughter needs, and I know there's a supply down the road at this pharmacy, but it's overrun by zombies. You go, I know, right? I got an ADHD. Okay, so you go to, that's what philosophers do. You go to this pharmacy, zombies don't hear, you got the medicine, so far so good, now you just need to get back. You jump the fence, and lo and behold, you slip. You fall on the floor, you break your ankle, the bone is sticking out. The zombies hear you, they're walking towards you. You're not going to make it back to your son or daughter. The pain is too unbearable. But lo and behold, there's a bag of cocaine right by you. That if you take it, it will block the pain long enough for you to get back to your son or daughter and save their life. What do you do? Let me put it a little stronger than that. What is your moral obligation to do?
Take the cocaine.
Now, do you have that on video? Can you say that again?
Don't call me out.
Now, why? Now, I would say it's wrong to do cocaine, especially for the fun of it. But I would also say I have a moral obligation to protect my son or daughter. So you have two competing moral values, and you go for the weightier one. It's not as if doing cocaine is now legal for the next 5 minutes, everybody go, like a kind of purge. It's, I have to honor the greater moral value, the greater moral weight, and because I have the obligation, especially as a parent, I'm going to do what it takes for the sake of honoring this moral value, not because I necessarily enjoy this one. Same thing when it comes to any type of these sticky situations where I'm going to shoot down a plane of innocent people for the sake of saving these, not because I like to shoot down planes, but because I want to save life. And sometimes to save life, it may be the case that you would have to take it, but you're not taking the life for the sake or as an end in and of itself. You're doing it for a greater moral value. More hands went up after that one. Yes?
But back to for the sake of another person, so if there was a situation where it was either the mother or the child and it could only be one, how would you distinguish between the two? And in this case, I don't think it would be analogous to the shooting down the plane because those people are going to die anyway. Here you basically have to choose, if you have to choose one or the other.
Right, well to answer that part of it first, yes, the people are going to die anyways, but in one instance, you are intentionally shooting down the plane yourself. In the other instance, you just let something play out. So there's a different responsibility and obligation put there. In the case you mentioned, I would say the same thing. There would come down to a case by case. And even there, I would say, I don't know of any that were like that because typically, if the mother's going to die, there's no way the baby's going to survive. Especially if it's an early on. Of course, unless we have technology that developed, which is part of what I was saying earlier, this viability is really more about our technology and has nothing to do with whether or not we have value or we're human beings. But if the mother's going to die, usually there's no chance for the baby, especially if, again, unless technology changes. In the other instance, then it would be case by case because you go back to that moral value thing. Which one has a weightier moral value? How far along? What are we looking at? What is the mother doing? What's going on? Why are they in this situation? But I would always say you ideally are going to want to always try to save as many lives as possible. And it's not a end in and of itself to kill the unborn child. And I know of no situation where, in other words, it's not a big epidemic of this happening and we just need a solution for it. Again, don't raise your hand. I've known of people who have driven drunk and did perfectly fine. But statistically speaking, we know that drunk driving leads to death and accidents, so we outlaw drunk driving. Now, I'm not going to go to, the governor or our representative and say, excuse me, my friend here, go ahead, tell him what you did last night. I drove drunk, I was hammered, and I drove better than I ever driven before. Boom, there you go, make it legal. That's just not good. So we don't make laws based on a hypothetical or based on what has happened before. We make laws based on what generally happens, and generally speaking, yeah, that definitely is not the case with anyone like you. But good question. Yes.
So I can't believe I've heard this argument, but I have.
I can believe it. I've heard all kinds of
I've heard the argument that the child is the unborn child is not innocent. Like the existence of the unborn child is somehow like a precondition if the mother so chooses that the child is like not innocent, so therefore I guess up for grabs in a sense.
So say it again. The child wasn't innocent.
Child's not innocent. It's a parasite.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about like original sin. I'm like, that sounds kind of like I don't know. Maybe some. I don't want to say. Gosh, I almost said that. Thank you, Lord, for that. Because I know some certain doctrines that may think that I disagree with, but.
The violinist analogy is that the violinist is hooked up to something.
Yeah, parasite, right. So, and I think that's what you're asking. Okay, so let's tie these two together. There's a famous argument that says, going back to the my body, my choice thing. So someone would say, well, the one would say this baby depends on my body, and why should I allow, and there have people that have straight out said, yeah, this parasite to take sustenance from me, it's my body, why should I allow that? So there's one, I forgot who it was, the lady who came up with the violinist argument that says, suppose one day you wake up and you find yourself attached to this violinist. You don't know who they are, but the doctor says, oh, glad you just woke up from, we just put you under. Turns out this violinist needed this transfusion or something and has this very, very rare disease and blood type, and you're the only person on the planet that fits what they needed, so we hooked them up to you without asking. I know, but hey, we only need 9 months. Can you give us 9 months? The question is, what do you do? They say he's a great violinist, we love him, he's very valuable, just 9 months. Do you have a right to say, no, you can't use my body? You don't have the right to hook yourself up to me without my consent, and I shouldn't have to be forced to do this. And they'll say, if you think that's a correct position, then you should see why abortion is the same way. Much to say about that. First thing, totally disanalogous. Here, let me add some fuel to that fire real quick before I even go to the answer. Some people would even say, legally speaking, if, say, my child needed a heart or some kind of transplant or something, or even something that wouldn't kill me, but they needed something that I could give them, I am not legally obligated to give it to them. Meaning, even if they're going to die without it, I'm not obligated to. So because I'm not obligated to give them something, well, how can that not apply to abortion? Okay. One, these two arguments are not analogous to abortion or being pregnant. Here's why. It's one thing to withhold giving. It's another thing to directly impose and take. Big difference. I am not obligated to give my son or daughter my kidney or something. Though if a parent's not willing to give their child something, then that's a totally different issue. But I'm not obligated to give them something, but at the same time, that doesn't imply that therefore I can equally go and slit their throat. There's a difference between, hey, I'm not going to give you something to help you versus I'm going to intentionally do something to take your life. I don't put a pillow over someone's face and say, oh, I'm just withholding oxygen. No, there's a difference between withholding support versus intentionally taking something away. Violinist analogy, I would say, is the same thing. Second, there is no moral obligation because I'm not related to this person, neither are they my child, and it's not just a matter of withholding, it's a matter of the disanalogy between their existence, who they are, and my relationship to them. If I were in a burning building and it was a choice between my daughter and someone else's daughter, guess what I'm going to pick? My daughter. I have a moral obligation there. And if someone wants to ask that, there's a similar argument there, someone wants to bring that up. With the violinist analogy is, first of all, they're not my child, son or daughter. I don't owe them anything. like I would owe my son or daughter. Someone once said in the debate that I told you I had, someone said, so you're telling me that you're going to force a woman to be pregnant? And I said, well, first of all, I don't appreciate the rhetoric. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. I didn't do anything. But I'm saying I am not going to allow them to kill their child. For example, and there was a case, and I wrote it down, I'll have to look it up, or you can look it up. There's many cases like this, but there was a famous case where these parents left their children at home for 10 days straight without anything. Guess what happened? They went to jail. Why? Because here in America, especially in Texas, there's something called negligence, and if you don't feed your children, if you don't feed your 2-month-old baby, you go to jail. Where are the women outraged about that, saying, how dare you force women to feed their children? Psh, the nerve, right? Well, I'm not forcing a woman to be pregnant any more than I'm forcing a woman to feed her 2-month-old baby. It's a moral obligation we have, especially as parents. I'm not related to the violinist. I don't even play violin. So I have no moral obligation there. And there's a big difference between me not wanting to give something that I have, withholding support, versus me intentionally taking something from them. Did that? Yeah. Yes.
I got a couple of quotes, if there's time, that will kind of spook. I talked about the singer at Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
He is very good with, makes a case for infanticide, which is really what your point is here. If it's not okay for infanticide, why is it okay for abortion? But a lot of people are now taking that and saying, okay, I'll take your argument and I'll ratchet it up, and I'll say, well, infanticide is perfectly permissible. And Michael Tooley is another one. He says, in defense of infanticide, which turns on the claim that a human being is not necessarily a person, quote, it appears that the life of a newborn baby is of less value to it, the baby, than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee is to a non-human animal. So it puts them on the level of animal.
Right.
So they're just taking their logic to its proper end. But I think a lot of people kind of fall into that logic. They don't really take it to its proper end.
Right.
The only thing you can say about Tooley and Singer and those kinds of people is that they're actually living with integrity. Their warped worldview.
Yeah.
I believe it's warped. But most people just kind of glide along. Can you comment on why people go along to get along with that kind of thing? What have you observed, and what's come across in the debates and the research about people's motives for kind of doing the see no evil?
Gosh, there's a lot, but I would say, and not just because I'm a Christian, but I would say it's the intention and evil in people's hearts because of just the lack of education, lack of God, lack of moral sense, suppressing the truth, if you will, and unrighteousness, where people tend to double down once they're pushed in a corner. I want to say something a little bit semi-personal that I've never said publicly, not about myself, but just in general. There are some people I would not want to debate publicly, not because I'm scared of them. If anything, it's because I don't want to, especially because we're live, I don't want to say too much, right? I know there won't be a challenge, and I don't want to embarrass them online. Here's why, though. Because once a person takes a public stance, and especially if they get embarrassed, I have just pushed them further into their beliefs. And now they're going to be even more hard-headed and harder to reach for the sake of Christ, because now their heart's even more hardened than it was before. Which is why I don't take debates with just anyone. I firmly even believe, and this is just my theological perspective now here, that the more that is added to what you know, the more you're held accountable for, even in the afterlife. So one of the reasons I do debates is, one, to reach the audience, and also because I know that usually the person I'm debating, they're set in their ways. Of course, I'm praying for God to change their heart, but it's like, okay, then if that's the way you want to go, at least, God can use anyone, right? But I've been invited to times where, someone who's maybe new to this or something, or atheist wants to do a public debate. I say, no, we can talk over the phone, but I'd rather not publicly, because I know once the public stance is taken, and let's say they feel embarrassed by something that happened, now they're going to double down, and whatever truth comes to their ears, they're not going to hear it. I think the same applies to even cases like abortion and things like this. There are people who are emotionally invested in some things. And I think a lot has to do with emotion. And I understand that. I think it's because of my ADHD that I can it's easier for me to separate emotion from logic, because for whatever reason it's easier for me to do that. But I know for some people it's like the emotion outweighs anything else they hear, because perhaps they had an abortion, or perhaps they had a situation, or they had a mother or father, or whatever the case was, who experienced something so traumatic that now it's a personal issue for them. And no matter what, I've talked to people, and they're going to, at the end of the day, bite the bullet, unfortunately, and say, well, yeah, I've talked to atheists. Well, yeah, then I guess, there is no free will, and I didn't really choose to believe that, and, I have no consciousness, even though I know that I'm, yeah, and that's just it. I'm like, wow, okay, well, there's nothing else to be said at that point. I remember Moreland once said, if someone says something like torturing babies for fun is okay, then they don't need an argument at that point, they need therapy. And it's just, unfortunately, it's really a heart condition at the end of the day. It's not a logic condition. It's not I don't know how many people I've talked to on various issues where I've given them the logic. I've given them what the answers they want. I say, okay, and what do you have left here? Well, I don't know, but I'm still not going over there to that side. Okay, well, I'll be praying for you.
Last question. Go ahead, down there, David.
Oh, well, this is kind of just a, fact statistic question. Do you know at what time in the pregnancy the average, mother finds out she's pregnant?
I'm not sure. I'm sure I've read it somewhere, just didn't write it down or memorize it, but I would, no, I don't even want to guess, but no, I'm not sure. But I know it's, say it again?
6 weeks or so.
Yeah, that's where I was going to guess. Sometime after the first month, for sure. Yeah. I've never been pregnant, so I wouldn't
I should have prefaced it just that I've heard of cases where people just give birth without even realizing they're pregnant.
Yeah, there have been some cases like that where a woman's sitting on the toilet and she hears a plop that's louder than it should be, and yeah, a baby. Yeah, it has happened. Yeah. So just to close, last thing I'd say is, well, first, thank you guys for having me. You can, the debate I did on abortion with the feminist lawyer is online. You're free to watch it. There's a lot of great things. There's even a highlight video. I can tell you afterwards about some of the stuff that came out of it, but one of the things she said, which there's a lot of things that happened that I really enjoyed because of just the way it played out, but one thing she said is we have a moral I'm surprised no one brought this up, but they said we have a moral obligation to feed, care, and clothe the children that are already here, because some people say, okay, oh, you're about life? Well, then take care of the kids that are here. Why are you caring about the ones that aren't here, the ones that aren't born? She's a lawyer, a feminist lawyer, debating this, and says, well, we should care, clothe, we have a moral obligation to care and clothe and feed the children that are already here. My response was, where are the unborn if not here? Where are they at? And why don't we have a moral obligation to feed and care for them? I mean, last I checked, they were here. I mean, are they in another dimension? Is there like a Twilight Zone going on? And then people argue, well, women should have reproductive rights. I agree. And once you're pregnant, you've already reproduced. You have the right to reproduce. I'm just trying to say you don't have the right to stop the thing that's already reproducing that has already begun developing. It's not a question or issue of women's rights. It's human rights, especially given a lot of times the unborn are female. Gianna Justin said, if it's all about women's rights, what were mine? And this is a woman who the doctor who signed her birth certificate was an abortionist because her mother tried to abort her. The abortion failed and she was born alive. If it's about women's rights, what were her rights?
At your site, can we bring up further questions like DNA?
Yes.
And
sure, absolutely.
Shows humanhood and all.
Absolutely, yes. I'm not.
Real quick, Hayden, go ahead.
Just an argument you hear a lot, I'm sure you hear a lot, is, well, how can you argue this? You're a dude. Yeah. Is there like a quick response to that?
Yes, how dare you assume my gender is what I would say. Or, that's sexist or so. Well, no, it's very hypocritical. I mean, there's a lot to say. I wouldn't say there's like one response. It's very hypocritical, especially because a man has no say in whether or not the woman gets an abortion, which means a man has no say over whether or not he can protect his own child. But if the woman chooses to have the baby, guess what the government does? You pay child support, and I'm forcing you to do that. Hypocritical. Yeah. And I'm not a woman, but if I see a man beating a woman, I'm going to speak out against that. And you don't see women say, excuse me, you're not a woman who gets beat by her husband. Keep your mouth shut, sexist pig. Of course not. So I don't have to be a woman nor experience that to stand up for that. Another thing real quick is people say, well, how many kids are you adopted? You did this, you're doing that. Well, how many women have you married that were being beat by their husband? Oh, you don't marry them. Okay, right. So I don't have to marry a woman to speak out against spousal abuse. You know, so there's a lot of things like that where you get to the heart of the question, and it's an absurd question at the end of the day. So,
All right, thanks a lot, Eric.